Thank you, Mom. Thank you, David. Thank you to all my family members who showed up to help set up. I'm honestly thrilled. So many people showed up. You showed up in the rain in Los Angeles for me. Like, if I know one thing about politics, if I've learned one thing since 2012, it's that things change when people show up. And I called and you all showed up, and that's how I know change is possible. So, and I called you all here to let you know officially that my name is Henry Mantel, and I am running for LA City Council, District 5. And if you need to know what the district looks like, because honestly that's the first question I get from everybody, this is what it looks like. It's a little weird, but that's what we got. And then of course there's the why. Why am I running? Why am I doing this? Honestly, it is because I'm angry. And I know that makes some people uncomfortable to hear, but it is the truth. I am so angry. And I'm angry because there are people sleeping on the street right now in one of the wealthiest cities on the planet. I am angry because even with all of our wealth, we can't even afford to keep the streetlights lit. I am angry because working hard is no guarantee of opportunity or economic security. And maybe most importantly, I'm angry because I love Los Angeles. And I want to help my neighbors live rather than just letting them die. And it seems like most of the people on the city council are perfectly content with the latter. And I am just not okay with that. So as my mom said, she actually handled this part of the speech for me. I grew up in Los Angeles, and now I work as a tenants rights attorney. I live in Park La Brea, just a few blocks from here. I worked as an eviction defense attorney for 3 years, and I've been a slum housing attorney for more than a year now. And as you all have probably heard, LA is dealing with a housing crisis. And while most people have heard of this crisis, I have seen this crisis closer than most. And I can tell you it is so much worse than anyone really knows for certain. It is so bad, I am going to be focusing on it almost exclusively through the course of this campaign, and hopefully by the end of this speech you'll understand why. So first I want to explain, illustrate just how bad the housing crisis has gotten. I want to explain why it's gotten so bad, and then finally I'm going to explain how I plan on solving it, and how we can also make progress on just about every other issue at the same time. So forgive me, I'm going to use notes just because I have some numbers I want to make sure everyone's aware of. But the housing crisis is actually really easy to understand. The fact is we just haven't built enough housing. Like, that is it. That is the crisis in a nutshell. 85% of the housing in the city of LA was built before 1990. From 2010 to 2015, for every 1 unit of housing we built in the county, we added 4 new jobs. From the 1960s to 2020, in every decade, we built fewer homes than the preceding decade, even though during that entire time the population of the United States just kept going up. So this has created an extreme shortage of housing, and that has caused costs to just skyrocket. And instead of throwing more numbers at you, I want to tell a quick story, just I think illustrates this better than anything. Because, as my mom said, I moved out here with my parents in 1994, and my parents moved out here because my dad's an actor, and I guess there used to be more work for actors out here. And trust me, I'll get back to that at some point, but they moved into a duplex. Georgie? They moved into the bottom floor of a duplex on Orange Drive in Hancock Park, right here in CD5. I've been informed that they paid less than $1,800 a month for that duplex. Yeah. I checked Zillow this week. The top floor of that duplex is currently up for rent for $6,850 a month. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And yeah, that's a 280% increase in rent in Hancock Park. And that's pretty much the same across the board in the city. And the story doesn't stop there, because then my parents bought a home on Mansfield Avenue, also in Hancock Park, in 1997. That home they bought for $410,000. It's now valued at a little more than $2 million. And that is a 388% increase in the cost of housing. And even when you adjust for inflation, that is a 143% increase. This is the housing crisis in a nutshell. It has just made the city completely unaffordable. Now, I understand if you're like my parents and you had the good fortune to buy a home in the 90s or earlier, this is a great success story. Honestly, it is the story of ballooning wealth and the ever-increasing likelihood of a comfortable retirement in a big house in a quiet neighborhood. But if you're like me, and you had the audacity to be born in the 90s or later, this is a horror story. It is the story of a city that is just growing ever more unaffordable, where people are robbed of any opportunity to build wealth or to pursue creative passions or to start businesses or families. And it's a story of a city where people are pushed out onto the streets or into their cars because they can't afford the rent. It's also the story of my clients. It's the story of the tenants that I've represented, being a tenants' rights attorney, the tenants who are getting evicted under false pretenses just so that the landlord can jack up the rent, or they're stuck in homes that are infested with mold or cockroaches or rats or bed bugs because they have no other options, or they are putting up with harassment and abuse from their landlords because they can't afford to move, or they're telling me that they are considering killing themselves rather than end up homeless. It's happened more times than I can count. So that's what I mean when I say this is a crisis. And I just want to kind of drive home the point here, because I feel like we hear the word crisis a lot nowadays, and that's fair. We are dealing with more than just the housing crisis. But when I say crisis, I don't mean something that is just going to work itself out on its own, or a minor inconvenience that'll go away. When I say crisis, I mean red alert. People are dying on the street. LA is in danger. All hands on deck. That is the meaning of crisis. And that is what the housing crisis is. The good news is, and I promise there is good news, I know how to solve this. I know, right?
That boy, Henry.
Thank you, everybody. So the fact of the matter is that right now in the city of Los Angeles, it is essentially illegal to build more housing in more than 70% of the city. That is it. That's really the problem. And until that changes, the housing crisis is never getting solved. Until that changes, LA is going to continue to stagnate and people are going to continue to suffer. Now, the law that makes it illegal to build more housing is called single-family zoning. And for those who don't know, single-family zoning was invented in 1916 in Berkeley, California, and it was invented for the explicit purpose of keeping a black-owned dance hall and a Chinese laundry out of a white neighborhood. Yeah. And so naturally, LA adopted it. And this caused the zoning capacity for the city to plummet from, in 1960, Los Angeles had a zoning capacity of about 10 million homes. So that meant we had the legal capacity to build 10 million units of housing in the city. By the 1980s, that had dropped to 3 million. And by the 90s, we were at capacity. So this is an intentional shortage of a basic human necessity. And in order to solve it, we need to do something about single-family zoning. And this has caused, really, Angelenos, more strife and anguish and suffering than could possibly be measured, and not just in the ways you might think. Because there is something called the housing theory of everything. Every housing advocate in the room just lit up. So there's something called the housing theory of everything, which is this idea that every public policy issue relates back to housing in some way. And I'm going to list several of these issues and explain how that works. And I'm going to start with the most obvious, which is homelessness. This should come as no surprise, but as housing costs go up, homelessness increases. As people can't afford the rent, they end up getting forced onto the street or out of the city entirely. And it's not because of drugs or mental illness. It's simply because we don't have enough places for people to live in the city. I have represented tenants who ended up homeless. And they ended up homeless not because of drugs or mental illness. They ended up homeless because sometimes people have to move, and then there's nowhere to go. And that's how people end up on the street. So if we want to solve homelessness for good, humanely, then we need to do something about single-family zoning so we can build enough housing for everyone. Then this also relates to the rent. As I'm sure you're aware, as I illustrated, rents have skyrocketed. It is astronomical how bad it's gotten. And the only way this is going to be fixed is by building more housing. LA has rent control, and the city council just took a good step towards tightening it up. But we've had rent control since 1979, and it has not made LA any more affordable. The only thing that is going to do that is building so much housing that landlords are fighting over tenants instead of tenants competing for a short supply of housing. And then there is also the other crisis we're dealing with, which is climate change. As I'm sure, I know it's raining outside, but it is still an issue. The thing about climate change is in order to deal with it, we need to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. And the only way that's going to happen is if we densify, we make the city closer together so that people can get around without getting behind the wheel of a car. We need people who can live close to their jobs without having to commute 2 hours from the Antelope Valley or from the Inland Empire. So there's also the fact that suburban sprawl, which has only happened because of single-family zoning, is the biggest driver of habitat and environmental destruction around. And so in order to reverse that, we need to densify and build more housing in the city. And the fact of the matter is that density is fuel efficient, it is good for the environment, and I don't think anybody who opposes housing density should be able to call themselves an environmentalist at this point. And then, it keeps going. And then there is, more directly related to that is transportation. If you are, like most Angelenos, worried about traffic or worried about parking, we can't solve these things by expanding freeways or by building more parking lots. The only thing that is going to solve these things is getting people off the road. And that means giving people more options in terms of getting around the city safely and securely, which should be walkability. We do need to build more dense housing so people can walk to their jobs or to errands or to a night out without ever getting behind the wheel. Or biking, for the biking advocates out there. I would love to see more bike lanes in the city. You're always out there in any crowd for sure. And I will say too, I live in Park La Brea now. It is the most walkable part of Los Angeles I have ever lived in. And my God, my quality of life went up dramatically just because I was able to walk to get groceries. Like, you don't realize how depressing it is driving everywhere until you don't have to do it anymore. And then there is education. So the housing crisis does affect education because right now, because of housing costs, young people are not having kids. And that means that there are fewer students. That means there's less funding for schools and education. And LAUSD enrollment has been cut almost in half in the last 20 years because of just how few kids are being born in LA right now. And then there is also the fact that approximately 17,000 of those students are homeless. And speaking of children, if you are maybe wondering why you don't have grandkids yet, or if you have kids and they don't live in Los Angeles, studies show that as housing costs go up, the number of children born goes down. So if you do want your kids or your grandkids to be able to live near you, we need to build more places for them to live near you. And that means in single-family neighborhoods. And then there is the business and Hollywood side of things. I promised I was going to come back to this. Because the housing crisis is also depressing business and culture, because it turns out the more money people spend on rent, the less money they're spending on anything else. So people who are rent burdened, who are spending more than half their income just to keep a roof over their heads, they are not spending money on food or going out to restaurants or going to the movies or buying clothes or doing anything that would actually make business thrive in this city. And this is also what's impacting Hollywood, because it turns out it's really hard to make art and make the rent nowadays. Like, it's impossible for artists to actually create when they're so worried about just survival. So if we want to revitalize Hollywood, we want to revitalize business and culture, we need to be building so much more housing here in the city. I got two more. Actually, I think I had a third. No. So I can keep going. This is just the ones I decided to go with. But because there's also the tax issue. LA is running a $1 billion deficit this year in 2025. And this is because we haven't built enough housing. The only way we can make up for this without raising taxes astronomically is by building more housing and expanding the tax base, getting more people here to contribute so that we have more money available to keep the street lights on or to keep them clean or to get the garbage picked up or anything like that. And then finally, this is the last one I'll address, but there are more. There's the federal government. So like I'm sure most people in this room, I am also concerned about the fascist in the White House and his gang of white nationalists and what they're doing. But the problem is that California is losing influence at the federal level because people are moving out, and they're moving out because California is unaffordable. California is set to lose 5 seats in the House of Representatives by after the 2030 census because of population loss. So all that work we did on Prop 50, out the window in 5 years if we don't build more housing here in Los Angeles. So, and I'll leave it at that, but if you have any other issues you're concerned about, I'm happy to try to relate them to housing in some way. So, this is why I am focusing exclusively on housing in this campaign. This is not a single issue campaign. This is just an issue that is so dire, it is affecting everything else. And it doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in, it doesn't matter how much money you make or where you live, we are all impacted by this crisis in one way or another. And the only way we can actually make any real progress on this is by just making it legal to build more housing across the city. I know there's a lot of resistance to this idea. I know some people may not like this. They think change can be difficult or scary, particularly if you're comfortable with the way things are. But the fact is that LA is never going to become the best version of itself until we accept the positive changes necessary to get us there. I truly believe LA can be the greatest city on earth. We can be a place where the city is affordable, where everyone is housed, where human rights are respected, where business and culture are thriving, where every day the air is as clean as it is the day after it rains. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. But we can make it happen. We just need to accept the changes necessary to do so. Now, I'll end by saying this, since I didn't need it. I'll end by saying this. On the northwest side of City Hall, above the entrance, there is a quote carved into the rock, and it's a quote from Abraham Lincoln. It's a quote from his Cooper Union speech, which he gave before he became president, and in that speech he made a very thorough and impassioned argument for why slavery should not be allowed to expand into the Western territories, which was, as you can imagine, a very contentious issue at the time. He said at the end of that speech, "Let us have faith that right makes might." And now those words are carved into City Hall, perhaps with the intention of reminding our leaders what leadership truly is. Now, I know beyond any doubt that eliminating single-family zoning in order to solve the housing crisis is the right thing to do. It's what needs to happen. And if I've managed to convince you, I'm going to need your help in order to build the might necessary to make it happen. So if you can, I would ask that you contribute as much as you can, sign up to volunteer, follow me on social media, do whatever you can to get the word out. Because I cannot do this alone. But together I know we can build Los Angeles into the most beautiful city on the planet. Thank you all for coming.
Hey.